Howdy folks, once again, here we are, Arizona springtime. We're going to start a new part, and this is Memoir of a Journey is the subtitle of Arizona springtime. Today part 3 begins, Sky Island Landscapes, Chapter 8, Landscapes Unlocked. Among the basic needs of living things, biologists have included the need for community or a defined ecosystem. Charles Perry, who traveled with the first boundary survey, began late 1850 following the Mexican-American War. They surveyed the boundary between Mexico and the United States, believed plants were the best way to define communities and landscapes. Further, he believed that non-living things had an effect on natural selection and organisms. Flowing rainwater will affect the rocks it flows over and any life on or under the rock. Even ambient temperature in the atmosphere and the amount of water vapor affect the local species. Non-living nature completes a landscape for organisms that have adapted to specific circumstances through natural selection. There are a variety of ecosystems in Arizona, all with their own biology. Our high desert location is not in isolation. Our local desert scrub is affected by the broader ecosystems for the entire region. For example, the lower deserts contribute to a general aridity throughout much of southern Arizona. Winter and spring weather in northern Arizona can be affected by systems that quickly sweep in from the northern Pacific Ocean. In the southern part of the state, weather systems may originate in systems moving north over the Sierra Nevada mountains of Mexico or from Baja, and even some larger weather systems from the northern Pacific. By now, most people understand that the deserts of Arizona are not solely waves of sand dunes such as those outside of Yuma, Arizona, in California, or like white sands in New Mexico. Although these ecosystems exist, they are not dominant. In Arizona, the Sonoran Desert is well known because the cities of Phoenix and Tucson are part of it. The Sonoran Desert indicator species is the saguaro cactus. The closest saguaro to us is in Davidson Canyon, 40 miles to the west, along Interstate 10 outside of Tucson. The Sonoran Desert tends toward larger cactus that also include beryl and a wide variety of prickly pear cactus. Closer to us and to the west is the San Pedro Valley. It has more in common with the Sonoran Desert and is the outlying transitional fringe leading to another desert, the Chihuahua Desert. That desert is located for the most part in northeast Mexico and in southern New Mexico. Creosote bush and tar bush are common, as well as agaves and yuccas. Since yuccas grow here, we have more in common with the Chihuahua Desert. Varieties of prickly pear cactus have also adapted to the Chihuahuan and appear here in great numbers. In higher altitudes, you'll find the oak woodland ecosystem. Within that ecosystem generally, I find the Arizona white oak, alligator juniper, manzanita, and the yucca-looking sotol. Birds I've seen are the rock wren, gray-breasted jay, and mammals such as white-tailed deer, cliff chipmunk, and porcupine. Close to us are the chaparral and shrublands that are in the middle elevations between the lower deserts and high mountains. Types of shrubs found in this ecosystem include the manzanita and the shrub live oak. Trees include the mountain mahogany and Gambel's oak. Found just above our town, those stunted trees are found at elevations of 5,000 to 6,000 feet. We are in an area that range scientists have classified as semi-desert grassland. Historically, our area was in the most northern part of the Chihuahua semi-desert grassland. Velvet mesquite and catclaw acacia are the indicators, as well as yuccas. This ecosystem contains a tremendous amount of diversity in grass species. These include varieties of gramias, muleys, needlegrass, drop seeds, and threon. There are well-adapted birds, including the house finch, kestrel, and the grasshopper sparrow. Some of the wildlife in this ecosystem are mule deer, Mojave and western diamondback rattlesnakes, gopher snakes, black-tailed jackrabbit, and the desert cottontail. The ecosystem has changed, though, and we are in a different ecosystem than 150 years ago. We are now in an ecosystem defined as desert scrub. Scrubs are defined as stunted trees. I do like biologist Frederick Gelbach's more inviting name for the ecosystem. He named it shrub desert. That name seems to make the place more accessible. In the Southwest, desert scrub had not been a common ecosystem until relatively recently. At the end of the last ice age, as 1 to 2 mile high glaciers retreated from northern parts of what would be the United States, the area became warmer and drier. Plants native to Mexico and South America took the opportunity to migrate northward. Common desert scrub plants that appear in abundance are walking stick cholla, mesquite, and yucca. In general, I can conclude that thorny plants grow here. According to a champion of the desert, Joseph Woodcox, those thorns and needles serve as a device that was invented by natural selection from differing means and routes to make the desert live up to its rough and tough nature. He reasoned that the thorns may be defensive because a loss of a branch or leaf by a desert plant is not as easily replaced as by plants found in other ecosystems. I have had countless encounters and will fully concur with Crutch. Even with a stout defense system to discourage hungry animals, certain animals such as javelinas often bite exposed edges of cactus, though mostly they dig up and feed upon the roots. To the west of our town is the San Pedro Valley. On road trips to Tucson, we drive through the valley. We always look to see if the San Pedro River is running above ground. The origin of the river is in Sonoran, Mexico, and it runs north or downslope from the higher elevations in Mexico. Most of the time we see only evidence of ATV tracks scouring the sandy bottom. Although some of the local bird species are more tropical in origin, the diversity of birds along the river equals that of temperate forests in America. Although there is lower diversity of species than the tropics, densities of some local species make up in sheer numbers for the lack of variety. Beavers, once plentiful, have been reintroduced to the lower San Pedro in Arizona. It is one of the 86 mammal species found along this intermittent river. To the north, a main tributary of the San Pedro River, Aravaipa Creek, runs through the ruggedly inhospitable natural paradise, Aravaipa Canyon. It remains the last stronghold for some rare species of fish. Aravaipa Creek is protected and is also a riparian area. The native survivors are the Gila mountain sucker, the long-finned dace, the coarse-skinned sucker, round-tailed chub, spiked dace, and loach minnow. I find it hard to resolve the morals and values of pioneers who extracted the natural resources for short-term, a lifetime or less, economic gain, and left a mess for future generations to clean up. Looking out the north-facing window in our house, we can determine the start of spring by looking for snow on Mount Graham. The northeast horizon is dominated by the mountain, which rises to 10,713 feet. It's part of the Peñasquito Mountains and is the highest mountain in the Sky Islands of Arizona. In late fall, the mountain is the first to receive snow on its long, jagged summits. It heralds the coming winter and then heralds springtime with a diminishing display of the last snow. The mountain is 42 miles north of our house, and the astronomical observatory, partially owned by the Vatican, on the top can be seen as the sun sets. It appears as a bright white bump along the silhouette of rugged tree and rock-lined mountaintop. Besides being a popular summer retreat for locals, it is home to the endangered Mount Graham red squirrel. The squirrel once had a peak population of about 500 during the 1990s. After wildfires devastated the Engelmann spruce and corkbark fir on the mountain, their numbers fell to a disastrous 37. These sprightly creatures rebounded the following year to nearly double their population. During the last ice age, this subspecies of the Fremont squirrel traveled along the unbroken corridors of spruce and fir trees. Following glacial retreat as the ice age slowly ended, those species of trees the squirrel relied on gained altitude, and the corridor of trees became broken and isolated. That isolation produced the Mount Graham subspecies of squirrel. It is distinguished by its head being just a little pointed, like an arrowhead. Its reddish-brown sides give the squirrel its name, Mount Graham red squirrel, but it is not a subspecies of the red squirrel. The eastern slope of Mount Graham touches the San Simon Valley 50 miles east of our house. Historically, the San Simon Valley was desert grassland. Soils tend to be not as deep at the edges as toward the center of the valley, so native grasses have a harder time growing. Depletion of the grassland along the edge of the valley has affected the habitat of the marbled whiptail lizard. That has allowed the western whiptail to move east from their original habitat and spread into the Chihuahuan desert. It is the transformation of the valley from grassland to desert scrub that allowed the western whiptail to move eastward. There is no doubt that changes in the geology also bring about the rise and fall of various species over time. In those cases, it is often the original species that dies out and is replaced by several successful variations. In that way, the original species can live on. Species evolve over time as a product of natural selection, and as author Stephen Rothman claims, natural selection chooses something over another and is not about adaptation. An example is the success of the spread of the western whiptail, a species that, through natural selection, became a desert scrub ecosystem specialist. An increase in desert scrub then comes at the expense of the marbled whiptail, which is chosen through natural selection as a grassland specialist. The western is able to travel to the new ecosystem, and as it meets the marbled, interbreeding may result in a new variation. Whether or not that variation is able to take the best traits from both parents remains to be seen. Those traits allow and help natural selection to choose. From our kitchen window, we can see the next location, the ecological cornucopia of the Chiricahua Mountains, rising above the western side of the Sulphur Springs Valley. Every once in a while, we hike and drive the scenic road in a forest of eroded rhyolite statues, part of Chiricahua National Monument. There are hundreds of oddly shaped towers that can take the form of something familiar, such as a duck. A few of the formations are so named, and others can be fancifully named by anyone with an imagination. Those eroded landmarks are the remnants of a massive ancient volcanic eruption from the Turkey Creek caldera. The blast 26.5 million years ago left a 12-mile-wide crater. Modern evidence of the ancient blast can easily be found on our property. They appear as small rocks with a glassy surface, black with veins of blood red. As small molten fragments of rock slammed into the ancient sea, the molten rock froze, and today the smooth, glassy side of those rocks pinpoint the impact moment. The opposite side of the rocks are rougher. The town we live in is located about 35 miles west of the former blast zone. The monument is surrounded on three sides by the adjacent mountain chain. The Chiricahua Mountains take their name from the Apache word meaning either big mountain or wild turkey. Author Weldon Held preferred the latter because he reasoned that the word is similar to the northern Mexico Native American Tarahumaran word for wild turkey. The mountain chain runs north to south for 40 miles, with the tallest mountains peaking just below 10,000 feet. The chain spreads out up to 20 miles in width. The mountains are part of the Sky Islands and are perhaps the most famous of the mountain chains that are within the larger Madrean archipelago. They are named Sky Islands because mountain ranges are isolated from one another by basins, passes, and valleys. Biologically, this resulted in isolated subspecies evolution. At the south end of the Chiricahuas in Arizona, there is a broad pass that nearly meets the extensive Sierra Madre Mountains of Mexico. This connected corridor helps in bird migration. Species of birds going to and from the Rocky Mountains in the United States use this corridor during their annual migration. That results in 325 bird species known to have visited the Chiricahua Mountains. Of those, 170 species of birds are known to breed in and around the mountains. The migrating birds travel north and south out of the Rocky Mountains in Colorado through Arizona and New Mexico's Mogollon Plateau. Generally, birds will not breed south of the plateau, and conversely, many birds do not travel north of the Chiricahua Mountains to nest. The variety of habitats that form along horizontal elevations of the Chiricahua Mountains allows for many more species to migrate than otherwise. Out the bedroom window and easily seen along the brief walk to the barn are the distant but rugged-looking Galiuro Mountains. They are 31 miles north of our residence and are volcanic in origin. They are the northernmost limit of breeding pairs of coatimundi, a medium-sized and secretive mammal that has migrated north into the United States within the past 100 years. One morbid theory about their recent arrival is that they came north during the devastation of the early 1890s drought. Being scavengers, the mass numbers of dead cattle lured them north out of Mexico. They remain in the area, seeming to prefer remote and wild country. I have seen only one during a hike in the remote Aravaipa Canyon wilderness. The coati was surprisingly large as it ambled along a stream-side game trail. Its tail is very noticeable, with a display of a fountain of fur. Nestled at the southwestern tip of the Galiuro Mountains is the Muleshoe Ranch, a cooperative management area that is directed by the Nature Conservancy. Adding the leased land to the privately owned land provides a little under 50,000 acres available to restore the conservation area to an ecosystem that existed prior to the 1880s. At the breakfast table, I can see Texas Canyon along Interstate 10, only a scant 9 miles away. Although the large balanced boulders and formations appear similar to the spires in Chiricahua National Monument, these formations are of quartz monzonite that formed 47 to 54 million years ago. As we drive by the rest stop in the canyon, we often see people photographing the massive boulders that rest on top of each other at precarious angles. 6 miles northwest of our house are the Steel Hills, named for an historic local rancher and stage stop owner. They are related to the Galiuro Mountains, geologically speaking. These low, rounded hills also are known to have rocks covered with incised petroglyphs. I have not been able to verify the existence of the petroglyphs. The next place can be seen out the bedroom window. A large and bright full moonrise can be counted on to appear over the Dos Cabezas mountain peaks in November. They are 20 miles east and north of the Chiricahua Mountains. The mountain has a prominence with 2 peaks, and thus their name in Spanish, two heads. At the very summit, the 2 heads are made up of volcanic breccia of unknown origin that dates back to about 62 million years ago. Geologists believe that the 2 peaks represent a frozen volcanic eruption that happened in the mountain. The resulting twin peaks are the largest known volcanic breccia in the world. To the west of those mountains, only 2 miles east of our residence, is the Willcox playa. Active sand dunes are located to the east of us on the far side of the playa, near the foot of Dos Cabezas. The playa is fed by rain landing on and running downslope into it. When it is dry, as it can be for months in late spring, winds will whip the surface up and over the 8,000-foot peaks of Dos Cabezas. The scouring from winds is so great that it has removed an estimated 2 to 4 feet from the playa's surface. Thus, when I walk on the playa, I walk directly upon the surface as it was formed during the Pleistocene 20,000 years ago. If I was suddenly transported back in time, I would appear underwater in a 30-mile long lake over 40 feet deep. Now, after it rains, the greatest depth is only counted in inches. Thank you, and we'll see you at the next chapter.